We are here with Yan Blanco to do a breakdown of SpongeBob SquarePants. This is something that I have mentioned a few months ago at this point that I wanted to do as a practical joke on YouTube, and that had spectacularly backfired on me because all of you had said that you were actually quite interested to see a SpongeBob breakdown there. And then came around Yan Blanco with his absolutely amazing fan art of SpongeBob, along with other fan arts that he seems to do on a regular basis on his ArtStation page, which we will absolutely link and you are able to see. And he does these amazing breakdowns that are super highly detailed of all of these characters from popular media. He really has that particular attention to detail, and I really, really, really want to understand what is his workflow to create those. So I'm very, very happy to bring you Yan Blanco to do a breakdown of his SpongeBob character. Yan, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, hello, Laura, hello everybody. Thank you for the invitation.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. So we're here to do a breakdown of your SpongeBob character. But before we do get into that, I think it would be quite useful for the audience that are here to know a little bit about your background. Why is it that you know the things that you know about 3D? And I also know that you do YouTube and streaming at the same time, right? So if you could actually present yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background in 3D art, and also where people can see the kind of work that you do on a regular basis.
Yeah, so I started with 3D softwares back in 2014 at the graphic design university. My first contact with 3D was with Blender software. It was amazing. Since then, I started learning by myself, watching YouTube tutorials, searching for online resources. And after that, I started to work on some studios back in Brazil. In the beginning of 2020, I moved to Canada with my wife and started to work at Tangent Animation as a senior surfacing artist, mostly on the characters. After Tangent closing down, I moved to AP Squared. I am working right now with them. I also do surfacing for characters and mostly for cinematics. So yeah, I started 2D with Blender. I still keep Blender as my main software for my personal works and professional works. But I also learned a few different softwares during my journey to improve my skills like texturing and sculpting. So I hope I can share all my process with this breakdown.
This is super cool because Blender is often regarded as a software that cannot be used in a professional setting. And yet you do these amazingly detailed characters. And that is your go-to software. I'm sure you use other things as well, of course. And we know that Blender isn't perfect. It does have weaknesses, especially on the texturing side. But you use Blender extensively professionally, right?
Yeah, I think Blender is a very powerful software. I remember when I started to learn 3D and I heard that was like 7 years ago. And it was common to hear from some friends like, oh, you like 3D, but you need to learn Maya or 3D Max or Cinema 4D because the big studios, they only use that kind of softwares. But I started to learn a few softwares like that, and it was like harder and slower and like, oh, do I really need to learn these softwares right now? So I choose to focus on my portfolio, push my limits with Blender. A few years ago, it was common to hear like, oh, Blender is like just for a hobby. People don't work with Blender, but right now I'm happy to see that more and more studios are working with Blender for big productions. So that's amazing.
You've seen Blender used and or are using Blender professionally on productions, right?
Yeah, so back at Tangent, we worked with Blender for my Ender 3. So we also worked with Substance Painter and Zbrush, but the final render lighting, I would say probably the comp part. Not sure about that, but probably the comp. was all inside Blender, Grooming inside Blender as well. Yeah, that was amazing because when I applied it to work at Tangent, I was afraid that, oh, I use Blender. So maybe they use like Maya or 3D Max or different softwares, but their main software was Blender. So it was like amazing, like, oh, this is my family. I want to work with them right now.
Something that we commonly hear out of students is if I do not use Maya, they will never hire me. You know, or if I know only Blender, they will never hire me. Like people get scared that somehow like if Blender is all that they know, that somehow they won't be hireable. But you know, like when you look at like you are someone who uses Blender on a regular basis. I know that you use other softwares too, of course, but um, clearly you use a lot of Blender, and a lot of your portfolio seems to be based off of Blender, and yet you don't seem to have a hard time getting jobs. And you know, like for me, the reason is very simple. Like your characters are really kick ass. You know, like your work looks really, really good. You know, and so it's like when we look at your portfolio, your characters are really amazing, and it's like it doesn't matter which software you've used to create those. Like what matters is the quality of the work that you are outputting. And I think that you are living proof, and your portfolio is a proof of that. You know, it's like less focus on software, more focus on quality. You know. All right. Tell us about the details then. So we've seen the ZBrush model. We've talked about the retopology, the UVs. Now we are within Painter. And
Cool.
so what is done within Painter, and how do we afterward get that within Blender for rendering?
Cool. So inside Painter, I usually import my normal map from ZBrush. So from ZBrush, I export my displacement and normal map. But when I export displacement, I like to keep the settings like mid-zero, 32
Yeah,
bits,
32-bit. Yeah.
and EXR. So, okay, I export the displacement and normal map. However, I don't use my normal map for render. I use my normal map to bake my curvature and ambient occlusion in Painter. So I import my normal map here. I remove it because otherwise I would export my normal map, merge it with the rest of the stuff. So I just bake my stuff with the normal map from ZBrush. And on curvature, I change the method for generate from normal map, and I disable this checkbox here. So that gives me interesting curvature paths, even if I don't have it high density geometry. So you can see there's a lot of information here, and my mesh is not super high density. So let's take a look here. This is my mesh. And then I start to work on my textures. So there is a lot of stuff happening here, but I will try to make it easier to understand. So let's start with the sponge. Okay, so I rendered SpongeBob with cycles render, and the shader of the main shader for the body is like this guy here. So there is a few stuff happening here, and let's try to take a look on that. But first, just to keep easier to understand, let me show this quick breakdown that I did, so it will be easier to understand. So we have right now like SpongeBob only with the textures without the normal map. So it's only substance painter textures, color, roughness, and no subsurface scattering yet. I mean, for the sponge, let's ignore the fabric and teeth. The next pass is to apply the bump path, the normal map from Painter. And on top of that, we have the subsurface. But the subsurface, I needed to split on two different subsurfaces because we have in Blender two kinds of subsurface. The random walk Now we have three after a few updates. But okay, I use most of the time the fixed radius. This subsurface here, I have no idea how to spell that, like Christensen Burley.
That sounds pretty good.
Okay, so random walk works pretty well for skin materials. However, since SpongeBob it's and sponge, like his name says, this subsurface was working better for the sponge look. So I needed to make a blend with so I wanted random walk for specific areas and the Christensen Burley for different ones. So I did a quick vertex paint here in Blender, and then I used the vertex paint as a mask. So I applied random walk for eyelids. Let's double check.
Could you explain? Do you think you'll be able to explain the difference between Random Walk and Christensen Burley?
Let's make a quick render and compare how they look. For skin, I like to control sometimes where I put. Okay, we have like here. So it looks a little,
Peeling skin again.
yeah, a little bit more natural. Some people work the same effect just in Substance Painter using anchor points and a few layers, but I like sometimes to push more, even if that makes my render slower. I like to have like this more natural look for the peeling skin.
You're getting a much better effect. Like you wouldn't be able to do this within Painter directly because this is actual physical geometry that is separated.
Yeah,
And
that is correct.
You can see that is the case. Like if you were to, like the noise that you have within Blender, you could create the same noise within Painter. You could do the exact same noise, but the problem that you're going to get is that then you have to bake that out as a displacement map, and you're going to get a much lower quality afterward render out of it, because it's a displacement map. So like your polygons, like in your case, since it's a separate mesh, the polygons of the flaking skin really are separate polygons that are on top of the skin. You get better shadows, you get better rendering, you get better transmission. Everything is better than if you had the exact same effect, but created in Substance Painter and then baked out through the displacement maps. Yan, thank you so much. I guess we're looking to wrap this up. Is there anything else interesting that you would like to mention?
It takes a lot of time to finish personal work. So sometimes it's good to have like patience and don't overload yourself, because I found myself in the past trying to make more complex artworks, and it was very frustrating to not finish them. So sometimes we just forgot to be more honest with ourselves. So the thing is, it takes time and it takes patience. It takes a lot of crashes and corrupted files, and 3D art, it's almost most of the time just trying to find what is wrong and fixing bugs, and it's crazy. But take your time and don't try to rush things. Art takes time, and it can be dangerous for ourselves to be very hard with us, to work faster. Oh, I need to make 10 projects on my portfolio. I need to work every single minute of my day, and sometimes that doesn't help at all. So yeah, just enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey. Yeah, it's gonna be a long one. So you better make sure that you do things that you enjoy and that you work on characters that you enjoy to work on. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. It was amazing to share some of my stuff, and thank you.